From the Gray Man Briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more. Now, the latest from GraymanBriefing.com. Here's this week's Sword, read out by Super Essie.
This week, ISIS-K plots coordinated attacks on U.S. hospitals and an aviation-related finale. Canada and Australia advanced a long-range radar system for Arctic defense with implications for NORAD and the U.S. national security. Courts issued major decisions on Second Amendment rights, striking down some firearm laws in Hawaii while upholding New York's ban on electronic self-defense weapons. Meanwhile, egg prices declined sharply from previous highs, and a Texas bill proposed dismantling the state's wildlife agency over hunting regulation disputes. Let's begin with the supply chain. Wholesale prices for a dozen large white eggs dropped for the fourth consecutive week, reaching $3.45 on March 18th. Just a few weeks earlier, on March 28th, prices were down to $8.05. They then fell to $6.85 by March 7th and $4.15 by March 14th. This steady decline followed a period of sharp increases due to bird flu outbreaks that led to the mass cullings. The recent price drop is being attributed to both reduced consumer demand and a pullback in those aggressive culling practices. For households and preppers tracking food costs and supply chain shifts, this development reflects a stabilizing trend in at least one key protein source. Moving on to the Second Amendment briefing. In Hawaii, the Ninth Circuit struck down key firearm restrictions. The federal appellate court ruled that two provisions of Hawaii's gun laws violated the Second Amendment. The first provision required that a firearm purchase permit be used within a narrowed time window, originally 10 days, later expanded to 30. The court said this arbitrary timeline infringed on a person's right to acquire firearms. The second struck-down rule had mandated that newly purchased firearms be brought in for in-person inspection at a police station. That too was found to be an undue burden. The court's decision aligns with the recent Supreme Court interpretations of the Second Amendment. However, the ruling could still face further scrutiny if Hawaii requests an en banc review by the full Ninth Circuit. Now moving on to New York, a federal court upheld the city's ban on stun guns and tasers. The Southern District of New York rejected arguments in Kelsey versus City of New York that the city's law banning civilian possession of electronic self-defense weapons, we're talking about stun guns and tasers, violated the Second Amendment. Plaintiffs argue that tasers and stun guns are bearable arms in common use for lawful purposes such as self-defense, and thus should be protected under the Constitution. However, the court disagreed, finding insufficient evidence that these weapons are widely used by law-abiding citizens, despite data showing, and this data was shown in evidence in the court, at least 300,000 tasers and 4.4 million stun guns are owned by civilians in the U.S. The judge determined the figures were not enough to establish common use. As a result, the court did not even consider the historical tradition test required by the Supreme Court under Heller and Bruin. So they're still banned in the city. Moving on to government oversight. In Texas, lawmakers proposed dismantling the Parks and Wildlife Department. House Bill 4938 would eliminate the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department and shift its duties to other state agencies. Under the bill, the General Land Office would take control of state parks and public lands. Wildlife conservation and hunting regulations would move to the Department of Agriculture, and game warden responsibilities would be absorbed by the Department of Public Safety. The bill was introduced by a lawmaker who is also a deer breeder. He raised concerns about how the TPWD regulates the deer breeding industry, especially regarding its approach to controlling chronic wasting disease. TPWD's current policy often results in the complete culling of deer populations when just one infected animal is found. This has sparked backlash from landowners and, of course, breeders. The bill has been filed, but it's not yet been referred to a committee. If passed, the agency would be dissolved on September 1st of this year. For many rural residents, hunters, and off-grid communities, deer are a crucial food source, both for direct consumption and for donation to food banks. This legislation raises questions about the future of food security and state involvement in wildlife management. Moving into national security, Canada and Australia partnered on an Arctic radar development. In a move with implications for U.S. defense and NORAD integration, Canada began working with Australia to develop an over-the-horizon radar, or an OTHR system. This early warning system can detect targets more than 1,800 miles away by bouncing radar signals off the ionosphere. Unlike traditional radar, OTHR extends coverage far beyond the line of sight, providing the ability to track advanced threats such as hypersonic missiles and cruise weapons. Canada currently relies on the North Warning System, which was developed to replace the older DEW line. However, security threats in the Arctic have increased in recent years, particularly from Russia and China activities, prompting a push to modernize the infrastructure. Canada's move complements U.S. efforts to increase its military presence in the Arctic. Officials in the U.S. have welcomed the development, although political reactions remain uncertain. The system will need to be compatible with NORAD's operational framework, and its development strengthens the Five Eyes alliance, which includes, of course, U.S., Canada, Australia, UK, and New Zealand. Finally, in national security, the Gray Man briefing addressed rumors of a mass casualty terror threat by first posting a roommate brief, a dead drop, and an update. Let's look at some of that coverage. Multiple human intelligence sources, risk assessment firms, and OSINT-centric intel organizations have reported that ISIS-K was planning a coordinated, multi-city hospital attack using VBIEDs and small arms. These were expected to be followed by hostage situations and later a major aviation strike. The targets were hospitals in cities with populations between 100,000 to 500,000 people, locations that see significant foot traffic but lack robust security. A propaganda magazine published by ISIS-K featured a cover image of the Statue of Liberty engulfed in flames with the caption, "They will see soon." The American Hospital Association and the Health Isaac issued a joint threat bulletin warning of the potential terrorist threat targeting U.S. hospitals while referencing a potential ISIS-K coordinated car bomb attack. After the Gray Man briefing's initial roommate coverage of that threat, another outlet posted a new report claiming to be based on 3 independent streams from 2 ISIS-K camps in Afghanistan, including communications referencing hospitals and coordinated assault tactics. That update said attackers may have entered the U.S. using fake Afghan passports produced by the Haqqani network, which often uses a 0101/XXX default birth date. The alert stresses that these passports were printed by Taliban-aligned operatives and highlights vulnerabilities created by open border policies. Recommendations include ICE audits of Afghan entrants, hospital security enhancements, and the formation of FBI and DHS threat assessment teams in at-risk cities. Attack windows include March 29th to April 19th, and also prior to a supposed 9/11 2.0, which refers to a potential large-scale terrorist attack designed to rival the original 9/11 in impact, likely involving aviation, high civilian casualties, and symbolic U.S. targets. In the alert, it's described as a second-phase operation following hospital attacks, aiming to overwhelm emergency and national security responses. Security officials are urged to prepare for emergency scenarios, limit vehicle access to hospital entrances, and conduct active shooter drills. Keep in mind, this is emerging out of rumor intelligence, which is often unverified and unconfirmed, but the reporting on this is definitely picking up across the board, so it's something to be aware of. And speaking of, that is it for this week. So please do remain aware, be vigilant, and stay safe. And to read more about this information, go to graymanbriefing.com.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the Gray Man Briefing.